Hi, it's me JD and welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'll be showing you some paper strip card designs as well as some tips and tricks along the way to get your paper strips just right. I do have to warn you, I might have gone a little overboard with all the paper strips. I started cutting one, then I started cutting two, then I just kind of spiraled out of there. So for more paper strip shenanigans, be sure to sit back, subscribe, and we'll jump right into all the paper strip card making projects. For these paper strip cards, I'm going to start off with some beautiful colors of cardstock. I get my cardstock from a variety of stores, so I don't really have a favorite place to source all of this great cardstock, but I can tell you from what I remember in this pile, there's some Gina K, there's some Cards in Pockets, there's some Paper Source, and I want to say Hero Arts. From all that great jewel-toned cardstock, I cut down some paper strips in different shapes and sizes. You can cut down paper strips in a couple of different ways. The easiest way is probably using your paper trimmer. That way you get a nice straight edge and you can measure the width you need. The only drawback to this card making technique is that it might be a little time consuming. However, it is a great way to use up your paper scraps. Another way to quickly create paper strips is to use these dies. These dies I have are from Stamp Market, and I'm going to tape a set of them together. They come in individual sizes, 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 of an inch, and 1/8 of an inch, I believe. I tape them together so I can run them through my die cutting machine, and it cuts out a bunch of different strips that I need at once. This would be the second most convenient way of getting all these paper strips. The first most convenient way of getting paper strips is using my electronic die cutting machine. So I just set up the design file to cut a variety of paper strips, and then my machine just cuts it all for me, and it cuts a lot, and I don't have to crank anything or wait for anything or reload a die again. I just set the cardstock on the mat and it does all the work for me. So let me know down in the comments if you want to see more videos and card making techniques featuring an electronic die cutting machine such as a Cricut or Silhouette Cameo. Once I've got all of my colored cardstock into paper strips, I'm just going to lay them out, and for these cards I'm going to be working with black cardstock. For the easiest application of these paper strips, I like to use a tape runner. That way I can just quickly roll out some tape and then start sticking all of these paper strips on there. Some of these designs I've already kind of sketched out, and some I just made on the fly when I started to film. For example, for this paper strips card, I was going to just do that right corner, and then I decided to do the other side so I have a nice V shape to this design. And during this process, I realized that my favorite part was not actually putting down the strips, but cutting off the excess. It was very relaxing and satisfying to just trim off all of those excess pieces. For this card, I penciled in a cross over my card front, so a line straight down the middle vertically and a line straight towards the center horizontally. And then I started working in sections. So I worked on the first quadrant, and then I started laying down those paper strips in a pattern. I first experimented with different colors, then I thought, nah, let's just stick to the same shade of purple. During this whole card making video, I started to realize that the 3 different shades of each color, the dark, the medium, the light, against this black cardstock, it started to look like laser beams, which was not the intent. I was actually inspired by a Sequins set, which I will show you later, but I really like the effect of these 3 different shades of jewel tones against this dark cardstock. I think I need to start using black cardstock more in my videos. The Nina Solar White cardstock has had its moment in the limelight. I feel like it's time for some dark black cardstock to just have its moment. After finishing up the second card, which I trim off all the excess, which is, again, my favorite part now, I'm going to set it aside and save all of the sentiments and jewel placing and note card placing towards the end because I like to work in batches. Also, I should mention that I'm not going to show the process for every single card I made because I think, the technique gets kind of repetitive. But if you want to wait till the end of this video, I will show you all of the different designs that came together during this paper strip mania. One card making tip to keep in mind if you're going to do a couple of different paper strip designs for cards is to be sure or have an idea of where you want the sentiment to be. For example, for this card, there's a big open space in the middle, so that is where my die cut sentiment will go. If you're going to cover the entire card front in paper strips, then you'll want to do one or two things for your sentiment. Either number one, you die cut it out of a really noticeable cardstock that the recipient will be able to read once they receive the card, or you cut out another piece to help back your sentiment, or another piece to stamp on it to have your sentiment on. But keep in mind, you don't want to cover up all your beautiful work, so it's kind of a balancing act. And for this card design, I wanted these paper strips to be at a specific angle because it's an X design across my A2 card front. However, the paper strips were not cut like that, so I'm just going back in with some fine point paper scissors to help trim that off. Another tip for you if you're doing this card making technique is if you are applying a bunch of paper strips together, you can also apply tape runner to the back of them all at once by just putting a piece of painter's tape to connect them all and then adhering them all at once. If you're going to do this technique, you'll definitely want to lay down a piece of copy paper so you don't get adhesive all over your workspace. This was such a great time saver for me, and by the time I got to this card, I was in the zone. I think this was my second day of filming. I cut out the paper strips and then made a few cards, and then this is my second day, and I was in it. And here's another tip for you: if you're gonna cut out all that excess paper, then you can lay down a little basket, a shallow basket, to help catch all those extra pieces, just in case you want to use them for another project like a shaker card or confetti. And so for this next card, I was inspired by the fabulous Laura Bassin, who made this pixelated square card out of her typical rainbow color scheme. Well, this time I'm using my color scheme, and I used a paper trimmer to just trim off these half inch by half inch squares. And then I'm going to do that with a couple different colors. And once I've got all my colors selected, I'm going to lay them out on my black card front, but I'm going to do this strategically. So I laid it out vertically, how I wanted it to be centered, and then I laid it out horizontally how I wanted it to be centered, and then kind of did the math that way, and then I'll just fill in the rest from there. Is this process a little tedious? Maybe a little, but is the end result absolutely awesome? 100% yes, it is. Once you've got all of those squares laid down on there, it is so just mesmerizing to look at, and you don't get this kind of handmade cards in a regular store. You can definitely tell that someone took a lot of work to apply this, i.e. me. Okay, so for this next card making tip when it comes to doing paper strip designs for your handmade cards is to use some masking paper. Originally for this card, I was just gonna have a square in the middle and some paper strips shooting off from that square, and it helps create, another new design that you might not have done before. About halfway through the design, I realized that I wanted a specific die cut sentiment for this card, so I changed gears and I decided to cover each opposing corner in tape runner. That way my die cut sentiment can just fit along that diagonal, and I have this cool effect from each opposite corner. And if you missed that other tip, as you saw, I was applying the tape runner, but I put down a piece of copy paper to help mask off that area that I did not want adhesive on. Thankfully, collecting all of those remnant pieces came in handy because I had some designs where I just needed a little like corner of a piece or a small tiny piece, and I just used those scraps from the strips to help fill in that area. And I used liquid glue just because the tape runner wouldn't fit. And speaking of liquid glue, for this card design, since this was the skinniest paper strip I work with, I believe this is 1/8 of an inch. This is the die from the stamp market. I definitely wanted to use liquid adhesive for this, just to get the precise amount of adhesive I needed on there without wasting any extra. And there is just something so satisfying about trimming off all of this excess cardstock, especially when you do it with a long pair of scissors. It feels like you're giving a haircut. Alright, now it's time to make greeting cards out of all of these backgrounds. I'm going to die cut a bunch of different sentiments, and then I'll put some liquid adhesive on the back and smoosh off any extra glue on some scrap paper, and then glue that sentiment on there. I'm using my favorite gold foil cardstock, and it just shines so nicely, and it photographs well. And here's the inspiration for all of these cards. It was this sequin set from I think Honeybee Stamps. It's called Aurora Borealis, and it's different shades of purples and blues and greens depending on the how the light hit it, and I just loved it, and that's how I wanted my cards to look. And I'm going to adhere these sequins on there just for that extra bling to all of my cards. All of my card fronts are now finished, and I'm going to attach them to note cards. These are A2 size note cards, and I'll just run through how I finished off each card, with the die cut sentiment as well as the sequins, to give you an idea of like all the designs I made. And you can certainly hit pause if you want to see a design in detail. For that card, I used some glossy black cardstock, which is also really cool looking in person. I'm trying to replenish my stock of birthday cards, so that's why I made this birthday card that could be masculine too. It works, for both genders, for any occasion, for any age. I think all of designs that I made work for any occasion, any age. And then for this next card, I wanted something fun. This is the one where it was like an X design, and I just did that in different directions and different shades, and I just added like a simple hi to it. I just wanted to leave as much of that card front exposed as possible with all that work I did with the paper strips, so that's why that one has a small die cut sentiment. For other cards, I just went big and bold. Speaking of big and bold, this next card is pretty striking when you look at all the different shades of green on there paired with that gold die cut sentiment. This next handmade card was very modern looking, so I wanted a very modern die cut, and that's why I have the friend outline, which I think is from Simon Says Stamp, in gold. And to save on that gold foil cardstock, I used the inner piece, the inner design on this next card that was the diagonal cut card, which I think this looks extra cool with the, the diagonal paper strips. It really does look like lasers against a black background. Here is another card design where I wanted to show as much of that background as possible, so I used the smallest die cut sentiment that I have that would still make a bold statement that would match the design of my card front. And here's another simple design that you can do with just like paper scraps. You don't have to go all ham like I did with all of these cards. Speaking of going ham, here's that square pixel card I did. I did light colors at the top, fading into the darker colors towards the bottom, and it's a really cool, modern looking, techie like gradient. And for the final card, this was just paper strips that I had left over in like kind of a brick pattern, but not really. All of these cards were just so fun to make, and I got to use different colors in my crafty stash that I rarely use. These jewel tones are just so rich and vibrant, and against that black cardstock, they really do just pop. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.